Well, now it's time to meet with Anna. There is a stop day. It's safe to say we'll have some fun today on Geek World Radio.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dave.
And this is AnnaMay.
And we are Geek World Radio. So today, we are not in the studio, obviously. I hope this place is okay. If you get bored at all about what we say, just try to figure out what's behind us, because there's a few things back there. So, what we decided to do this week is, since the Expendables 2 came out, we decided we're going to talk about some of the really cool things in 80s and 90s action movies.
What makes an 80s and 90s action movie?
Exactly.
Because Expendables and Expendables 2, they're big, old school action extravaganzas.
Yeah, they're sort of like homages to that period, except it stars all those people from that period, so it's not really homage, it's more just sort of like...
It's like them reminiscing, you know?
Yes, exactly, yeah, the continuation, if you will. So, okay, the first thing that we decided that you need in any 80s and 90s movie is the lone badass hero.
Yeah, this is a necessity. Even if he starts off with a group...
Yeah.
At some point, everyone in that group is either going to be captured or die, and so he is going to be alone.
Yep, whether it be like Commando, or Mad Max, or John McClane.
Or
Predator, exactly, because he started off, exactly. You know, no matter what, at the end of the day, it's always that one guy who's totally awesome. Over the top. Only Sly could have arm wrestled that giant guy at the end.
You know? I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, his kid could have shown up at the end, and pushed his arm, right? That probably would not have been allowed. Okay, number 2. Aliens, ninjas, and or punks.
Yeah. Now, there may only be one of these things,
yes.
It might be one punk amongst the group of baddies.
Yes.
But you will find one of these things in pretty much every 80s action movie or 90s action movie.
And the best of them usually had, 2 or all of them. I love They Live with Roddy Piper. There was aliens in that. Or do you ever see a movie where Dolph Lundgren was fighting that alien who had a CD shooter on his arm and he's shooting decapitating fools with CDs and stuff?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think it's called I Come in Peace or something. It's crazy.
I have seen Suburban Commando.
Yes. Yes, the best way to figure out all of these things and what makes these movies is the movie Last Action Hero.
Yes.
By Shane Black, who wrote it. Because that had all of those things, pretty much. Except for, I don't know if it had aliens, but they had, the ninja in his closet.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much everything on this list is in that movie except for one, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But one thing it did have was number 3, big muscles. Oh, yeah! I didn't pull out the whole gun because it would have scared people too much.
I mean, they would have thought they were going to get shot.
Exactly. It would have been those Mickey, the Bugs Bunny where you flex and anyway. But yeah, big muscles were what it was all about in the 80s and 90s. I mean, that was the time of the jacked. Yeah. That's the time we grew up in, right?
You know what's funny?
What?
Okay, so you have this toy, this Terminator toy.
Yes.
For some reason, they minimized his muscles. I mean, look at that. He almost looks like... I don't know, he looks scrawny for Arnold.
This is Governor Schwarzenegger version of the Terminator.
I mean, that's bizarre. You would think that they would have that they would have really shown the muscles. And I granted they didn't show quite as much definition in things back then, but I mean he almost looks scrawny.
Yeah, exactly.
Him.
It's like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man figure probably had bigger muscles than this. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. But big muscles was all about, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of the big purveyors of this. But, there's also Jean-Claude Van Damme, Dolph Lundgren. One of the only guys who didn't was, Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
He was really tall and he sort of ran really weird.
Well, and he usually wore big clothing.
Yeah.
And so you would have no idea if he had muscles or not.
Exactly. Unless you saw Above the Law, which you realize not too much. But that was okay because he was a total badass. So
and he was
it didn't really matter. Exactly.
With a ponytail most of the time.
Exactly. But really the quintessential 80s giant guy scene of all time has to be in Predator with Carl Weathers and Arnold Schwarzenegger when they first meet. They're like, grrr, and they arm wrestle. It's the shot of the 2 biceps in the arms, and you're like, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
You know what my favorite scene in that is?
What?
When there's a bunch of jack guys just shooting into a forest.
Yes. It's the movie was a little too short, and so they needed to spend 2 minutes of shooting into the forest.
You know what's a good idea when you're fighting an alien that could just jump out and kill you at any time? To waste all your bullets shooting into a forest.
Exactly. But when Billy, when he had the big muscles and cut his chest, that was the coolest moment of movie history. Sly in all his movies, but particularly Rocky IV, him and Dolph are so jacked in that movie. It's crazy. The number 4 thing every 80s and 90s action movie had was huge guns.
They tend to be guns that are ridiculous and not real.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll like take a real gun and they'll add stuff to it to make it look super cool or futuristic or whatever.
Yes.
And sometimes they'll just take 2 guns and tape them together.
Tape them together, yes, a la James Cameron and Alien. Still one of my favorite things ever. It's true, it's like Jesse the Body Ventura in Predator had that big like minigun which they later used in T2. The Desert Eagle was sort of like the always future weapon that they always use in everything. Or like you said, they amplified like in Time Cop, they took that Beretta and put a few weird things on it. Now it's like a space Beretta or a time Beretta or whatever.
A space and time Beretta.
Or what about a Cobra? Like, remember in Cobra where they spend like, there's like a 5-minute montage before the last battle scene where he's putting together his like elaborate suitcase gun. Do you remember that? And it's got like, and he's like a cop, right? But he's got like this like fully automatic like Mac 10 type thing.
Well, he was Cobra.
He was Cobra. That's a good point. And even little kids got big guns. Remember RoboCop 2, the kid with a briefcase gun? Which, by the way, that exists. Can you believe it?
Yeah, briefcase gun does exist.
It was like invented.
It was a spy thing.
Well, I thought, was it? Oh. But the one that was in that, though, was made specifically for, like, bodyguarding, like, dignitaries and ambassadors and stuff like that. And also, not only that, it could have also just been elaborate weapons, even if it isn't big guns. Because sometimes you got the post-apocalypse, Right. So, for instance, Steel Dawn, I'm going to mention it, even though you don't know what I'm talking about, but the Swayze had that cool sword, or the Highlander movies. Remember the Kurgan has that giant sword he has to put together and stuff like that? And the prostitute comes in and she's like, I'm Candy. And he goes, of course you are.
The funny thing is, like, one of the great things about a sword is not having to put it together.
That's a good point.
It's right there. It's one.
Yes.
Yeah.
The number 5 thing you need for one of these 80s and 90s movies is the big chase scene.
Yes. Now, this came before the 80s and 90s. It used to be, it's really always been a staple of action. Sometimes it's in a car.
Yes.
Sometimes it's in a boat. Sometimes it's just one guy running after another guy.
Sometimes, there's a guy on a motorcycle and he's standing on the motorcycle and shooting a gun at guys. Right. A la Hard Target. These things happen.
That's the most logical thing to do when you're on a motorcycle.
Of course, that's what I would do. But it's true. This is definitely a holdover, especially of the 70s, where like every 70s movie, you actually couldn't put the movie out unless there was a car chase scene. Right. It's great. The MPA was like, this movie's great and everything, but where's the car chase scene?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we can't accept this.
Exactly. So, it's a big deal and you have to have it. Number 6, and quite possibly my favorite, and quintessential 80s especially thing that you need in these 80s and 90s action movies, and this is one that I think has changed the most, and that is boobs.
Yeah. Now, really, there would be actual, like, full-on Yutsuki boobs. And the great thing about the 80s and 90s is they would really try and find a way to make it seem like it was supposed to be there. Under Siege, they had a girl popping out of a cake.
Yes.
They would either have somebody that the character would... Oh, and by the way, she's a stripper. Or, hey, this scene is going to take place in a strip joint.
Exactly. You ever see Commando with that part where Arnold's like fighting that guy through the motel, like through the walls of the motel, and they go through and there's this young couple like having sex in there, so that's how they got boobs.
Yeah, I mean, you find a way.
Or like Tango and Cash, like, with the girls, like the guy and the girls in the car when they're like having like a chase scene or something. It's like, when there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately the 90s PC movement came around and changed all that.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I know, that's lame, guys. But, there's a little bit of that coming back, but overall, you can't even do it. They used to be able to show boobs in PG-13.
Really?
Yeah.
It's kind of like how you get
Vacation.
So it's kind of like, oh, right. It's kind of like how you get like one curse word.
Exactly, but, not anymore.
So it was a curse word or boobs.
Number 7 in all of these 80s and 90s action movies that you need is the bad guy monologue. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of these.
Yeah, this is very much like, James Bond villain type thing, so from before the 80s and 90s. But you always, in order for these movies to make themselves feel like they're more than just, a bunch of action for no reason, the bad guy has to have a reason for doing what he's doing. And so, he'll take some time out, and whether he's explaining it to the main good guy or to his underlings, he will take some time and he will tell you why what he is doing is right, and whether it's dumb, whether he has a good reason or not, doesn't matter. He will tell you.
Yeah, and then usually they get killed like right after, and that's kind of awesome.
Sometimes during.
Yes, you never know. The number 8 thing that all of these movies have, and this is like their signature, I mean, without this, you don't even have an 80s or 90s action film. It's impossible. They put it in, like, the drama section if you don't have this. Explosions.
Yes. Giant explosions.
Necessary, yeah.
You know, it's funny because Mythbusters on many occasions now have had to debunk half of the old 80s and 90s action movie explosions. It's like when you shoot into a tank, one of those
propane tank.
It doesn't blow up. You can use the most high caliber bullet. It doesn't matter. It's not going to blow up.
Those guys just ruin everything, don't they? Yeah, it's true, though. I mean, come on. I mean, like, every movie of that time period had an explosion, and usually the good ones usually had, like, 3 or 4, with the biggest being the last one at the very end. Once again, I always come up with Predator, because it's such a great movie. You know, at the end, like, Arnold, like, runs for, like, 20 feet, and there's a giant explosion, and then Predator 2, they're like, there's an explosion that took out, like, 6 city blocks or something like that.
You know what's great?
What?
In 21 Jump Street, how they kept on thinking everything was going to explode.
Yeah, that was good.
No, it didn't. You want to know why? Because things don't just explode.
Yes, and that's just the sad reality of the real world, isn't it? Things just don't explode. Yeah. The number 9 thing all these movies have, at the end of all these movies, there is always a rad good guy versus bad guy hand-to-hand fight.
Yeah, now, this didn't really happen back, like, before the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of gunfights and stuff like that. But in the 80s and 90s, they really started getting some good fight choreographers. And, and they started incorporating hand-to-hand combat. They also got actors, I mean, like someone like Steven Seagal, who had martial arts training. Or was willing to get martial arts training.
Yeah, or somebody, like Jean-Claude Van Damme. I mean, that's the thing. And also, I think it also incorporates the whole muscles thing. You know, it's weird to have a guy with giant muscles just shooting a gun all the time. Yeah. It's like, you don't need giant muscles to shoot a gun all the time.
It's true. You know, I have a feeling that maybe somebody saw some Jackie Chan movies back then and was like, hey, this guy's movies are huge over there.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't matter which one you watch. Everyone has some kind of awesome fight. I mean, it's like, Mel versus, like, Gary Busey in Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
And even if it's not, like, the good guy against the main bad guy, he's got, like, a right-hand man who's really evil, too.
Yeah, because the bad guy might be, kind of wimpy.
Like, he's like the brains of the operation. Exactly, yeah. Like, the big fight, for instance, in Die Hard, when he fought, like, the blonde guy who was, like, the ballet dancer or something like that, It's like he didn't, like, beat up, like, Alan Rickman.
It's true.
He shot him.
Yeah.
And then threw him off a building, But he kind of deserved it. He was sort of a dick anyway, wasn't he? And
so he got defenestrated.
He did. Defenestration. Oh,
if you can figure out how to use that in a sentence today, do it.
Do it. All right, number 10, the last one, the one-liner.
Yes. Now, oftentimes there are many, many one-liners. Usually every time the good guy is shooting a gun or about to shoot somebody, he will, it's one-liner, bang!
I would say Arnold was definitely the lord of the one-liners.
Well, because when he said it with that accent, it just, the humor value of that.
Yes. And he always did it with a smile. I think that's the difference,
Yeah.
It's like, he was always like, Predator throws a knife into a guy, stick around. Like, hasta la vista, baby. It's just like, the one-liner it's the most important thing.
Usually they're quite punny.
Yes. Oh, also, Seagal did it a few times, too. But definitely I would say Schwarzenegger of all of them was the best of them.
Yeah,
without a doubt. So, I mean, that's really it. That's our list of the things that you need for those awesome 80s and 90s action movies. Expendables 2 is already out. If you haven't seen it yet, what's going on? Your childhood is back, and it's awesome, and Chuck Norris is there.
I know.
And, AnnaMay, is there anything else you wanted to say?
You should all just go back and watch those movies from your childhood because they are so awesome. And you know what's awesome?
No.
That Bruce Willis got to be the guy that broke the mold.
Yes.
Die Hard totally got to break like almost every one of those rules.
Yes.
Because the whole thing was that like he was the regular guy action hero.
Exactly.
It was so cool.
And he really did, and that's why he's totally awesome. And that's why he was one of the stars of North, It's like that's how you get to that certain level, that you're, a guy in a bunny costume or whatever he was in North.
Yeah,
that's when only Haley Joel Osment sees you if you're that cool. That's just the way it goes, It's weird. Anyway, if you guys want to listen to our show this week, our radio show on Indie 100 and The Point, we are doing a review of the new movie Lawless, starring the new generation of action heroes like Tom Hardy and Guy Pearce and Shia LaBeouf, who's definitely would be considered in that. I mean, really, he was in all those Transformers movies. He was in Eagle Eye. He was in Indiana Jones.
True.
And a monkey had the same haircut as him. So that's it. Make sure to listen to us next week, or rather watch the YouTube show next week. This is Dave.
This is AnnaMay.
And you've been watching Geek World. See you next Wednesday.
Well, now it's time to loot with Anna. Non-stop day. It's safe to say we'll have some fun today on Geek World Radio.